we exist by Title 10 law to be that subject matter expert. We're expected to say no when something's wrong. And if you're not getting the support that you need, let us know so we can go talk to your OPSO, or we can go to R3, or we can establish those relationships, or perhaps we already have them established. Many times I'm the bad guy for my units, whether it be a mobility person, an embarker, or an 0402. And even so, like at a MAG, when you only have so many ground officers, even as a chief one officer, I joked and said that I was a speaker of the dead. All the young ground officers would come and complain to me, captains and below. As a chief one officer, I would go give it to the majors on behalf of them, never saying where it came from. They just thought I was the crazy guy, but at least I was helping them get their points across, so they were getting what they needed.
Welcome to the Humorless Lot podcast. The information, opinions, and recommendations presented in this podcast are for general information only. We do not represent the U.S. Marine Corps, the Department of Defense, or the U.S. government, and any reliance on the information provided in this podcast is done at your own risk. As the hosts of this podcast, we also understand the risk we are undertaking by expressing our opinions, but we do so for the betterment of our 0402 community. If you have any concerns about anything you hear, please contact the producer listed in the podcast description. We hope you enjoy the show and that you'll look into our other community tools on Facebook, Discord, and Teams. Thanks for being here. Semper Fidelis.
Welcome back to the Humorless Lot. This is episode 6, part 2 of our Mobility Officer series. If you haven't had the opportunity to, highly recommend you go back to part 1. It sets the stage for where we are in the conversation now. We look forward to hearing your feedback. Thanks for being here.
To be honest, I was just thinking about this as we were talking to you too, especially this is education for Scott and I too. We're soaking up the wisdom here and just hearing what you guys have to say, and what excuse do I have to just I could every day just call either one of you and just bullshit with you for 3 hours and talk about it, but I don't think there's enough time in the day to do that as I sit here in my car recording a podcast at 9:40 at night.
I think other 402s have that question. And there's probably a ton of log chiefs that have that question. And, because these are the conversations that we geek out about.
So talent management, right. I agree with Rich, let the 0430s handle it. But the problem is that an 0431, the young embarker, also we call them embarkers, but what's the other name everybody calls them? Log clerks.
Yeah. So
you have the logos that want to hold on to this guy and just have him do all the random stuff the foreshop gets assigned to, which is great. I understand the job needs to get done, but now instead of that Marine going and getting his hazmat cert, instead of going to the EDS schools or any of the other MOS specific ones, he's being tasked to go do ground safety. He's being tasked to go do training stuff. Right. And I know everybody's got to pay into that pot, but we got to look at the young 0402s who are where the rubber meets the road, to actually look at this embarker and say, how am I going to prepare him to serve the Marine Corps going forward, and not our little minor things going on here? You need to be able to stand up and whoever's tasking these guys out to do things that's eating away from them, to stand up and say, no, hey, he's an embarker and he hasn't built a 4.6 or Lima pallet. So I know this unit down the street here is doing that. So let him go get some hands-on and get some actual MOS credibility. I cannot stress this enough that folks don't do it. Open up the TNR manual for the 0431 and actually look at that and say, oh, he's supposed to do this every 6 months and he's never done it since he got to the fleet. Open that up. You're going to have some eye-opening experience and realize, wow, maybe I'm not the right guy to be tasking or to be looking at getting this guy the checks in the box, if you will, to get all these things done and make him effective. Can he move up? Can he go to this other unit and be successful? Or are we looking at him as the Fro's assistant in this unit? Is he the grounds and facilities guy? Why are the guys who are technically in a technically deep MOS, as far as skills and requirement are, why we keep tasking them out to go cut the grass just because they sit in the foreshop?
I would offer that it happens a lot where they're just the extra bodies because people don't know how to employ them correctly. But I would offer also, so at the regimental level, the mobility officers, so 06 level command, that regimental mobility officer for U0402, so you're tracking, they are responsible to develop a training plan for all of your 0431s, 81s, 91s, log chiefs, they're doing their thing, but specifically 31s, 81s, and in the future 0441s, and not all mobility officers do it, which is BS. We used to be inspected on these things, but the reason why that's so important is, like, say for instance, I'm at the MAG, and I'm responsible for all this as a community sponsor, 04XX, me as the 0430, I am the subject matter expert. We are taught to believe that we are responsible for the development of these Marines. So we educate and help mentor 0402s, as they're typically the S4 proper. So we develop these training plans. It's supposed to be a monthly thing, a quarterly thing, an annually thing that gets published. It doesn't mean that they have to be the one to do it. Like the way that I'd run it at MAG 12 when you guys were at 171 is I would rotate the unit that's responsible to teach the class, and here's the topic that's going to be taught. And some of it is irrelevant. So for instance, if you're at a MAG, at a flying squadron, you don't always have the ability to load ships. So when you go into the TNR standards, there's stuff that you have to be proficient at. That's not always possible. However, I can give a class or have somebody give a class or challenge a Marine to look up the pubs and present a class. Of course, mobility officers should be reviewing that class. The log chief should review that class. The embark chief should review that class prior to them being given. But this is an opportunity or a method in which you can still meet those TNR standard requirements, even though your specific unit does not do that particular thing. But I know, frustratingly enough, here at the division, we often get young Marines, so PFCs, Lance Corporals, which at an MSC level does me no good. And I would be willing to argue with anybody who says otherwise, but 3MEF is the busiest MEF in the Marine Corps. Between all the TSC events, between all the UDPs that come in and go out, we're constantly moving and we constantly have things going. Sending brand new Marines to an MSC level staff is wrong, and it's a disservice. So we try to explain, like when we have our 96s or our Liberty briefs, we pull all the Marines together and we try to, at least that worked for me, is explain to them why what they're doing is so important, tied to just the training aspect for Marines, but also the real world implications, and especially being a stand-in force, why what they do every single day, and the coordination and the phone calls and the back and forth. This is why it is so important that we get this right now. Come execution, real world, if something were to kick off with our adversary, we're not going to have time to train. We're not going to have time for you to try to figure it out. You should already know. So we actually TAD our Marines out to the battalions and the regimental levels, at least from the division staff, the 0431s, to try to get them that experience. So again, going back to that talent management, why the hell are PFCs going to an MSC staff like that? And we're told, well, we can't get anybody, grow them. It's your job to teach them. So going back to that previous conversation with the OJT, like, yes, to a degree, you're right. Absolutely. But the problem is the turnaround is so quick between exercises. The teach are so insane that you really aren't afforded that opportunity. So we really rely on the regimental level mobility officers to make sure that they are doing what they're supposed to be and having that training package established. And there's nothing wrong with having somebody from the division, the MLG, the MAW coming and actually talking or having a larger forum. The challenge is finding the time when that's possible.
So everything you said, 100% correct. But and gearing this towards the 0402s, dial into the doc, right? That's the deployment operations team. This is all the units that are deploying within your MEF, right? And right, a lot of folks are dragged to that meeting, and that's how we talk about a lot of boring stuff. But for the young 402s in there, dial into that. See when the next time one of your sister units are deploying. And then call up that 0402 and say, hey, could you use an extra embarker for a week during that? All right, you're getting your guy experience. The best time to go and do something is not your first time to do it and you're being looked at and make it successful. Get your guys out there. It's not like you have to send them TAD for in excess of 180 days, get them trained in something. Oh, hey, they're loading a train. Now, I know that may not mean a lot to other folks, but that doesn't always happen. If a unit's loading up a train, send your embarker down there, even if he just stands off the side and watch. There are, again, I'll harp on this a lot. I fully recommend opening and reading a pub. but it is different from sitting there and watching it get loaded and see the complications and the issues that go into it. I do agree the 0430s should be responsible for ensuring people are getting trained, talent management, spread loading that, applying it to the choke points. But when you're that 0402, don't be afraid to say, I have a talented guy here, but he doesn't have this experience. Who's got this event coming up that my guy can come and build Air Force pallets, that my guy can see what it's like to go through a joint inspection with the Air Force. Because again, those are not things you want to do for the first time when standing in front of a pissed off airman who just wants to fail you so he can go home.
Yeah,
that's a really good point. Even for or 402s themselves, I think would be an awesome opportunity too to call out their brothers and sisters and ask, hey, I see that you guys have this evolution, MPF, ships, planes, whatever, or even plannery sessions. Like, why not? That's what we're supposed to be doing, is collaborating. And especially when you're not responsible for it, that's the best time to go. Yeah, good point, Matt.
For your 0402s, I'll tell you, from a battalion S4, it probably took me a tour because I had a very contentious relationship with my regimental mobility officer the first time, and that was just my pride and ego. To be honest with you, it was just me being a jerk. Even though he's kind of a jerk too, but then by our second tour, we were best friends because we were both jerks, and then we got along fine. Once but it was it's, you got to give up your 0431s and 81s. When the regiment asks for them, you're like, no, the regiment doesn't task you, right? Isn't that the first thing that a brand new S4 comes in and says, regimental mobility doesn't task you? So one, get over yourself. He needs to get over to the regimental mobility side, and you can listen to me, or you can learn it the hard way and then do it your second tour. Two, and most battalion commanders are like this, but nowadays, I guess, like post-combat deployments, when you just didn't have time, right? You're in that PTP cycle, you just didn't have time. Like, before a Marine checks in, you need to have a school schedule for them, and your log chief should be all over that. Like, it's easier to like gap a Marine for, like, you've been gapped for him for 4 months or whatever, and then you're like, oh great, I got this new sergeant coming in. Well, just plan on him being gone for the next 6 months. Like, check with him, with his wife, with his family, his kids, all that other stuff that goes along with being a leader. But like plan for him to just be gone. That way you can invest whatever investment you put in as a battalion that you can capitalize on. If it's late in your career and you just checked in the battalion, you still owe him that. And you're just going to have to throw the middle finger to the last guy who didn't do it. But for sure, like that's the easiest way, I think, to transition in, is when you got new guys coming in, is just to pretend you don't have them for the next 6 months and just train them up on everything that they'll need, and they'll save you. I mean, those two things, put your ego away, and just go talk to your regimental mobility officer. And then on the flip side, for the mobos that are there, especially because they're like new chief warrant officers usually, and like, go talk to the OPSOs of the battalions, I think, and make relationships with the OPSOs. If you can do that, because the fours being a hard head, that'll help. Because at the end of the day, who cares about your relationship between that 0402 and you? Like, that's all that's doing is hurting the Marines. So if you want to really just get to the point where you're making the Marines better, just go talk to that OPSO. Don't say he's a jerk or anything. Just go, hey, here's some things that I need so you could be operationally ready, because here's some concerns. Your fours got a ton of stuff going on that he's worried about failing, because he's worried about failing you. But like, you and I both know, because we've been in the Corps for a little while, like, if we mess up like squad attacks, it's really not, he's like losing sleep at night, worried about squad attacks right now. When really, you and I know something on that could fail, we could figure it out. But he can't miss the movement to Bridgeport. And I need your 0431 to get training for the movement to Bridgeport, and kind of build that relationship there.
Or I need this 463 Lima pallet certified by the airmen to get it out the door.
Yeah.
You
gotta have your own hazmat duties. Don't depend on regiment or other battalions.
Yeah, so I would honestly offer two specific courses that you should look at as an 0402, of making sure that those young 04XX are actually going to, if you can afford to lose them at the beginning, is look at the hazmat certifying course, and then also hazmat material preparation, and also AMC load planners. Your mobility officer at the regiment should already be able to, or if you don't know, either your log chief or you can reach to your MOBO and ask, hey, could you find out what this dude's training certifications are if you're forward thinking. The other thing is if you have a problem with your mobility officers in 0402, like say, because obviously we start at the 06 level command. So if you're at the battalion, you have an issue with a mobility officer, like, man, go eat chow together and hash that crap out. The other thing is I always advertise for my mobility officers and or the younger lieutenants or captains that let me be the bad guy for you. If you're not getting the support, you come and tell me in confidence you're not getting the support from your 3. I will then go talk to the 3, not diamond people out, but you can leverage me to get what you know that you need. And I'm the bad guy. I'm a restricted guy. I can flip out and go crazy and nothing's going to happen to me. You're no 402. You just have to get promoted. You have to play the politics. We exist by Title 10 law to be that subject matter expert. We're expected to say no when something's wrong. And if you're not getting the support that you need, let us know so we can go talk to your OPSO, or we can go to R3, or we can establish those relationships, or perhaps we already have them established. Many times I'm the bad guy for my units, whether it be a mobility person, an embarker, or an 0402. And even so, like at a MAG, when you only have so many ground officers, even as a chief one officer, I joked and said that I was a speaker of the dead. All the young ground officers would come and complain to me, captains and below. As a chief one officer, I would go give it to the majors on behalf of them, never saying where it came from. They just thought I was the crazy guy, but at least I was helping them get their points across, so they were getting what they needed. Like, that's another tool that you can use us. If your mobility is unwilling to do that, then perhaps you talk to some other mobility officer that you may know, or ask advice from some other people at different echelons to have conversations with those mobility officers, because that's what we are here to do, is to facilitate doing things the correct way. And if you're not getting what you need, or you're not getting the support, or your ops isn't listening to you, let us blast your ops. I promise. At my level, going to the Division G3, walking in his office and telling him that his unit is effing this all up, he's going to call that CO or that OPSO, and there's going to be traction made just from that simple conversation. So I offer that as well.
If you're ever in doubt whether the mobility officer is going to be on your side or not, like, don't think we're going to shit on you because you're some young guy out of school. Like, we don't care. Is this going to get you, your unit, or the battalion regiment, is this going to get us deployed to the firefight faster, better, more efficient? If the answer is yes, you have our backing. That's all. We old crusty guys, that's all we care about. Can we get the mission done? Can I get everybody in theater so we can start a firefight? Everything else is semantics, and you can buy us a beer afterwards. But we are there to fight for you. If it's going to accomplish the mission we want to see get done, we're going to help you out.
So far, we've talked a lot at the MSE and MSC levels. I do want to talk probably for the next 20 minutes and just try and talk like the MEF and then above the MEF. Rich, especially, I want to tap into your experience in the Pentagon. For logistics officers that end up going to that level, I'm curious what other 0430s are there in the Pentagon and what they're doing in the Puzzle Palace. After that, I think we'll just segue right into the combat cargo officer stuff and then wrap up with the relationships between 0430s and 0402s. I think that conversation has been really valuable. Is okay, this is how 0402s should be interacting with 0430s and how we can accomplish the mission better. So MEF and then above MEF levels, is there anything you guys want to talk about?
All right. So my time was at 2 MEF, and I'll say as much as it kills the Marine soul in me to say this, a lot of it is driven around meetings. And I don't mean that just a shit on meetings. A good MEF strategic mobility officer, or a lot of times are run by the assistant strategic mobility officer, one of the CW05, the major, the lieutenant colonel, whoever's running the meetings in your particular MEF. Dial into the deployment operations team, the DOT is what it's going to be referred to as. This is where they talk about, they'll have the FDP&E folks. These are your MAGTAF planners at the MEF level, as well as all the supporting units. And this is generally handled between the MAGTF planners and the mobility officers. We never turn away a logo who's dialing in. If anything, we're happy because it shows you give a shit. And so you're going to have the support of the entire MEF, even fellow units who are going to support you to do that. So having been at the MEF, the DOT is where everything's worked at. This is where you learn what other units are doing as well as what you have going on, and you could present it to the group. A lot of times, something will come down and, hey, you have to do this on this day, and you don't know what to do about it. You're like, oh shit, this isn't going to work for my unit. My CO doesn't like this. Why do we have to go about it this way? I don't understand why I have to be here on this day when I don't have to leave till that day. Dial into that thing. Ask those questions. Don't be the silent individual. It's what these meetings are for. You'll learn that, hey, you have to go there because you're aggregated with another unit. So you're not playing ball all by yourself. You're traveling with a companion unit on this. You learn like, hey, this unit is going here on that day and it's going to fill up the inspection lot. That's why you have to wait till this day, or you have to get there earlier, whatever it is. You're going to have some of those questions answered, as well as you can throw out some bones like, hey, can we change this to this day? It works better for us. That is the meeting that's going to make these changes happen. Because there's always going to be something that's going to make you upset. It's going to mess with your timeline for whatever it is you guys had planned. This is your key into the bigger picture, as well as being your ability to manipulate what that is, change happy to glad, whatever you want, or find out your bigger piece of the pie. So I highly encourage folks to dial into that meeting, if nothing else. Outside of that, at the MEF level, you have the MDDOC, which is the MAGTF Deployment Distribution Operations Center. This is your mobility and your distribution officers, your DMO folks. And then their counterpart is FDP&E. That's your MAGTF planners, the 0511s who work the TIB fittery stuff. At the MEF levels where those two come together. And if done properly, these folks are all but sitting left seat, right seat. One's still in the 4 shop, one's still in the 3 shop, but they're talking to one another. This is where we make things happen without needing it to go all the way up the chain, all the way back down, back and forth, wasting a lot of time. It can happen in one conversation. If you have some concerns with how your unit is going to move somewhere, right? Involve obviously the echelons that move up above you. If you're the battalion, make sure you're including your regiment and the division with you. But don't be afraid to go up to that level, bring those folks with you and say, hey, do you guys have a chance we can sit down and talk about this? They're not going to say no. You bring up those concerns is now their concern. They want to see you succeed. Your success is the MEF success. So bring up these concerns. You're going to have their attention. They're not going to look at you like you're some uneducated idiot. That's not what we're thinking. We're thinking this is somebody who cares, and we're going to solve that problem together. You'd be surprised how easily these things can be solved when you have the right folks sitting in the right room. Don't think you're going to be looked down on. That's not going to happen, right? If anything, we want folks to do that. MEF, and really to quickly summarize, MEF is also the final stop before things leave the Marine Corps, i.e., your request, your ETRR, which is your request for surface shipping, or your SAMS, the strat lift request, your request for airlift, that leaves the Marine Corps at the MEF level and going over to US Transcom. So it's always worth when you check in, try to find out who does what, and find out what they want, because I highly encourage you open up documents like the DTR. DTR is going to tell you you have to submit a request by a certain date. That's great. It's nice that you read that, but keep in mind, that's when the MEF submits it. So if you're a subordinate unit, make sure to call up and say, hey, I read this thing submitted within 15 days, right? And they're like, well, we submitted within 15 days. You have to get it to your battalion 5 days prior, and they have to get it to us 5 days prior before that, and so forth and so on, because everybody has their own cut in the pie, because, again, you're not the only deploying unit. That's called aggregation. Sometimes you're going to get lumped in with other folks you don't want. Aside from that, don't be afraid to go up and just talk to the folks at the MEF, right? It's one thing to conduct business and skipping levels. It's another simply to go and poke your nose around and say, hey, what do you guys do up here? They're not going to be offended. They may not always have time, so call ahead. But I do highly encourage knowing what's happening at that level on a personal level, showing your face and showing you care. They will not let you fail if you're having those discussions.
That's
Can
awesome.
we like cancel the ego real quick too? Like Captain 0402s, you don't know what the you're doing, excuse my language. So let's just cancel the ego right now. Like, I don't care what DTR you opened, I don't care where you've been, I don't care what you did when you were enlisted. You don't know what you're doing. So don't feel, you should never feel like I don't want to go to this meeting because I don't want everybody to know that I don't know what I'm. Everybody knows you don't know what you're doing. So let's just get the ego part. I'm telling you this because I wish somebody would actually, somebody probably did tell me this and I didn't listen to them. So you're not going to either, but like,
We
I
say
mean,
that
that's all
lovingly.
great stuff because it becomes so much easier when when you're not trying to be contentious, when you're trying to just work things out together with them. And you know, a lot of that pressure comes from your battalion commander is the one who's like, why are we there 14 hours early? Why do you know, like I got to take them from their wives. It's like 1 a.m, you know, like that's the person who's pressuring the Lago. And Lago's like, I don't know, because that's what they told me. Well, go to those meetings and get the answer. Because if you told the battalion commander, well, sir, because the reason why is because there's multiple bus runs going that day. We're the top priority, but the drivers need 8 hours of sleep. We could show up 8 hours early, but we'd have to send 8 drivers to bus course, and then they could drive the bus. You know what I mean? Like you start providing options for them, and then it's a lot less contentious with you and the battalion commander, and it's also a lot less contentious with you and the mobility folks.
Yeah, and absolutely, and I forgot to mention within the MD doc is the UMCC. So these are the folks who are arranging all your transportation and whatnot. So that's another huge part that's included in these dot meetings, and there's no limit to how many people can attend.
Great. Yeah, we say all these things lovingly, having been captains and knowing that most of us did not know what we were doing. And that's part of the reason for this podcast, is to try and help educate people and bring us into the fold, sharing the wisdom. Yeah.
So many wasted hours, right? Of just emotional nonsense that we
Yeah.
just
Making this, yeah, I mean, I have a younger brother who's in the Navy, and you know, he's 9 years younger than me, and we've had lots of conversations about being in the military and all kinds of stuff. And I probably often come off to him like I'm being a know-it-all and I'm just trying to, you know, suppress him with all this information. But really, I just don't want him to make the same mistakes that I made. You know, I want him to be a better version of me. Like, don't waste your time on these stupid things that I did not need to waste my time on, and I hope you don't waste your time on, you know?
yeah.
Dude, that was so good. Like for me, I learned a lot, Matt, just listening to that. And it's cool how when you have these conversations, like how disparate pieces that you've heard in different places all of a sudden like lock together, and I'm like, oh, that's how those things fit together. So thank you for that. That was good.
Yeah,
Go ahead, Rich. Yeah.
I was going to add even to that aspect too of that relationship between the mobility officer and the 0402. Like even as a mobility guy, there's stuff that I don't know that I've yet to experience. But I know somebody who has, or likely I know somebody who has. So if you have something coming up, I've never been too ashamed to admit when I don't know something. In fact, when I screw something up, I'll be the first to admit that I screwed it up once I accept it mentally that I actually screwed it up. But like having that conversation, a lot of mobility officers come off as arrogant. Most could come off as being condescending or assholes. Again, if you can look past the personality and look at the information that they're offering and look at how they're actually offering the information, not necessarily in delivery, but in terms of references and or why are they saying what they are saying. I promise you that from experience, there's absolutely a reason why they're telling you, just like what you gentlemen are talking about is you're trying to help people from making similar or same mistakes that you've either experienced or you've watched other people or other units experience. I promise I do that on a daily basis when we do planning, and it gets to the point where people won't listen if you're just nice. So I know that I have a reputation about myself, but for people who don't know me, and then I know that that reputation is slightly different for people who do actually know me and spend time with me and have conversations with me. None of it is personal. It's all business. And it's meant to get the effect desired, or the desired effect, which is to do things the right way and trying to avoid some of these pitfalls when you talk with your mobility officers, most of them have been around for 12 plus years. So chances are they probably have experienced something in the past that they're trying to avoid the oncoming train wreck that they know is going to come. And they'll do their best and they'll go about it in a particular way that you may not like. But I would ask that get past the delivery and just listen to what they're saying. And if it's a heated moment, leave it, come back when it's not heated to have that discussion so you can avoid those train wrecks and understand how to articulate that to your OPSO or to your CO. Because a lot of people, and from my experience, they're too afraid to tell the emperor he's naked. That's exactly what our job is as staff officers, is to shape commanders' expectations and make sure that they are well informed to make a decision. Do not hide things. If you're on the MLG side and you're at a CLB and you are the OPSO as no 402, do not synthesize information to your boss. Tell him the entire picture. If you can't articulate that picture, do not be afraid to bring in the subject matter experts to articulate that directly to the CO. That's why they exist. That's why we mobility officers, that's why we exist. We don't exist to work for you. We don't exist for the XO. We exist for the CO. We exist to advise him to prevent him or her from getting in trouble or causing issues or incurring additional costs. Really, at the end of the day, it all comes down to money. But just trust, I ask. And if your mobility officer is a piece of crap and you can't trust them, make sure that the echelons above that know that there's an issue. And then the other part that's really hard, hold them accountable. Write the adverse fit rep. Give the counselings, because those people who are pieces of shit do not deserve and should not be promoted and put into higher levels of influence or authority.
Rich, anything you want to talk about with your time up on the end staff in the Pentagon? Just for perspective building for us as 0402s to know that we've got advocates up there at the highest echelons of the DoD advocating for us in the logistics world. I'm interested, if there's anything you want to talk about on that subject.
Yeah, absolutely. It's very interesting working in the Puzzle Palace, aka the Pentagon. So when I first got there, I went to OpNav in 953, which basically it's a Marine 1 to 2 star. The bill it's a 2-star. Sometimes they fill it with a Navy admiral, but they work under the N9, which is it's basically a 3-star. It's not operationally based. It's basically all the shooters. So aircraft carriers, subs, amphibs, the ESB, all those things fall under N953 or N9. Even destroyers fall under them. Aircraft also fall under N9. So N98, I believe, was the aircraft. So there's all these weird, crazy codes, which, trust me, I worked there. It was confusing at first. So all you have to know is that the senior combat cargo officer for the Navy, so it's a Marine attached to Navy staff, resides now at OpNav in 95. There's only been 3 people in the billet. I was the second person in that billet, so it's relatively new. Captain Kim from LG, 3rd MLG, he's going out there to be the 4th. And so when I came in, I was still kind of developing what that billet was supposed to do. And you work obviously for a Marine, or I worked for a Marine 2-star at the time, which was awesome, but also challenging because my immediate boss was a civilian and the next boss above me was a Navy captain. So 06 in the Navy. And although that 06 had prior amphib experience, he was a CO of one of our amphibs. He did not have a good experience with the CCO. So he had his own beliefs on what a CCO doesn't do, or their value proposition, I guess, to the ship. So that challenged me a little bit. My personality, I'm pretty aggressive. So I forced my way into the conversations. Typically at that level, we deal a lot with the ESB. We talk a lot about amphib requirements. We also deal with NAVC and PPNO from that seat to include CD&I on ship requirements, any of the stuff that comes up for MPF or future amphibs. Again, requirements all reside within CD&I for the Marine Corps, but being that CCO on that staff in 953, We definitely have buy-in. We have influence because this is the Navy. They pay for all this stuff. You also get insight on what happens. And a moment ago, I said it's all about the money. It truly is. Peeking behind the curtain, working at the Pentagon, it has distorted my opinion on the budget, on how we palm things, just because I've seen how it actually works. But just so you know that you have a combat cargo officer that resides there. If there's any ship stuff that you have questions on, they produce the 30-year ship build plan. So if you perhaps happen to be at a MEF or a MU and you're the 4 and your boss is asking about future ships, because they do, you can reach out to that CCO, that's the OpNav, and get that. That's where that product actually is generated from. It's not the 30-year ship build plan, but it's the 30-year ship architecture plan. They call it a different name now, but it just shows when the ships came into service, when they're due for maintenance, and then any oncoming or ships that are coming online. There's a lot of weirdness too, just influencing advocacy for whatever it is, combat cargo, 0430 specific stuff within that realm. You also have the senior mobility officer, the lieutenant colonel, sits at INL, so Headquarters Marine Corps INL. And he does obviously a lot of logistic stuff, MPF stuff. He also is the Octaville sponsor for community. So talking about assignments, if you're an 0402 at a senior level and you have problems with your mobility officer, you would obviously go to your MEF SMO, the strategic mobility officer, the lieutenant colonel that sits at the MEF. If you have a personal relationship with the guy that's sitting out INL, sometimes that happens. But there's a lot of other stuff that he does in terms of logistics, innovation, and other stuff that I do not know. There's another mobility officer that resides at INL. It's a major's billet. They're the air officer for the Marine Corps, or at least Headquarters Marine Corps. It's all your system stuff. So I-codes, SSDM, all of that stuff is ran from that seat at INL. So when you'll get asks to send 0431s out to systems related things, like they're doing a data call for SSDM, or they want users, 0431s, to go actually to some location and work on the system that they've upgraded and provide inputs and feedback to improve the system. Please send your Marines, your junior Marines who are in the system daily. And then also you have PP&O. So at PP&O, plans, policies, and operations, think of that as the G3 of the Marine Corps. That's the 3-star. The combat cargo officer / mobility officer at PP&O works for the 1-star director of operations. It's a 2-star billet, oftentimes filled by a 1-star. Before I got there, that focus was green space management and improvement of green spaces on amphibious warfare ships. So think your LFOX, your TAC logs, any green space on that ship. That's the advocate for the Marine Corps, is sitting in that seat at PP&O. When I got there, because I came from N95, I happened to get an email that I probably shouldn't have gotten, but since I still checked my OWA, I looked at. I forwarded it to my Marine Corps account, and I forwarded up my chain to the 3-star to show that the Navy was talking about getting rid of amphibs, and it changed the course of my billet to where, although we're not requirements people, my billet is a subject matter expert when it comes to the waterfront at PP&O. So Headquarters Marine Corps Combat Cargo Officer. So very engrossed and involved with all the amphib ships, their maintenance, their deployments. So if you happen to be a MU S4 officer and some crazy person from PP&O is reaching down to the 0430 side, or you see a message come across telling you that you have to provide all these documents to PP&O Direct, the reason is because we track the watch floor for the Marine Corps works for the 1-star boss. He's called the Director of Operations. Having all those products to show the L form, what's loaded on the ship, the ARG spread, how the stuff is spread throughout the ARG, that helps decision makers at the highest level, service level, inform the joint staff on capabilities and our ability to respond and actually get tasked from the joint staff with missions. So if they don't know that information, they can't articulate it quick enough to where the Marine Corps actually gets the task, and then it goes to the Army. So all those little nitnoid things that some people think are super unimportant, and no one ever reads these reports, and no one reads who's embarked on what ship and what capabilities exist. I promise you, sitting in that seat, they do matter, and they do pay attention, and they directly relate to the Marine Corps' ability to provide capabilities to the joint force and or the combatant commanders. And it starts at that lower levels. So at the MUs, at the MEFs, that stuff really matters. That they also do a lot of other advocacy stuff. We have a surface warfare officer, a SWO, who is a Navy person who has amphib experience, DDG experience. They sit on our staff. So there's a team of 4 typically. Most of the time it's 3, a master guns, a major mobility officer 0430 / combat cargo officer, and then a major SWO. And we do everything amphib related. We track other vessels and stuff, any other tasks that come from director of operations that go to the 3-star, again, to help advocate at the most senior levels. Some of the stuff that I was involved in during that 2 years has made an impact on the Marine Corps that people don't even know about. The fight between the Navy and the Marine Corps that's ongoing about the amphib requirement, that started because of that email that I received. If I hadn't received that email, we'd have less amphib ships already. And the Navy's plan continues to try to divest in them. And we have to influence Congress to tell them, no, you can't do that. And oh yeah, hopefully Congress gives the money to the Navy specifically to keep amphibs. But there's so much stuff that goes on at that higher level. It's interesting to come back now to the MSC level at a division where I had all this experience working with congressional staff, government accountability organizations, and then coming back here where hopefully my future life, I will be able to hold the Navy accountable. But we have a lot of advocacy at multiple levels within the 0430 community to where we can influence and shape a lot of things. And I believe that was the overall intent, talking about the higher echelon commands and that there's 0430s that are up there. If I missed anything, please let me know. If there's specific questions, let me know.
I think that's perfect. That's again just a download of great information as to who's advocating for the 04 community up there.
Quick question where does the MOBO sit in MEF? In the 3 or the 4?
So at least over in all the MEFs I'm familiar with, it sits in the 4.
Why?
That's correct.
Why?
1 MEF and 3 MEF.
So I see where you're getting, and this is a big conversation point for us is the mobility officer, should they be in the 3 or should they be on the in the 4? And there's not a clear answer to that. The mobility officer needs to jump between the 2. They need to be that connecting file between them, because right, everything mobility officer does is really driven by the TIBFID, which is a 3-shop owned program. However, and though the mobility officer takes all his cues from there, and right, the deployment plan, the movement plan follows in line with what the operations need. However, we all, being logisticians here in the 0402 community, that's not happening without the 4-shop being involved and being there and making it happen. So that's why they're that go between. And though, depending who you ask, I think you'll always get a different answer on where the mobility officer should sit. I think the right answer is the mobility officer should probably have a desk in both and go between the 2. If they don't have an open communication between both the 3 and the 4, the mobility officer should be able to walk right in, regardless of the level, whether it's MEF down to the regiment or whatever. They should have the ability to walk directly into both the 3 shops and the 4 shop and talk to folks they need to, and folks not to put up some wall like, you don't belong to us, you wear a different whatever. If that's happening, that unit's going to fail regardless. A good mobility officer is going to walk between the 2, and the folks and both sides need to listen. Most mobility officers don't care who writes their fit rep. They just want to succeed at what the mission is, what they're trying to do.
Yeah. And one of the reasons I asked too is that I was at Soxent and I was heavily engaged with movements. All 2G ran, so all for Air Force. So most of my strategic side is taught by the Air Force. And then at CENTCOM at CCJ3, that's where the force deployment was inter theater. Then when you got to intra-theater, then it was CCJ4 and CDDOC was a 1-star down there. So it was very just interesting. It seemed to Now it sucks, and it resided in the 4, and we were the only service component that had it in the 4, and that was just kind of personality based. I think all the 3s are just snake eaters. They're all soft guys, super smart, super intelligent, like wouldn't not talking bad, but like just didn't. They cared about movements and they're very involved with logistics. It just wasn't. It was better fit down in the 4. You know what I mean? And then we would just go up to the 3 for all the signatures.
Unit is putting up any kind of wall just based off of who writes the mobility officer's fit rep. They're setting themselves up for failure regardless. Again, it shouldn't put up barriers. It shouldn't matter where they sit. They should get support. They should be part of the planning regardless of which shop they sit in.
Yeah, I found through most of my time as a mobility officer, I actually work far more with the S3 or the G3 than I do my own stuff for the G4. Oftentimes I get a little frustrated at the G4 requirements because I don't care about the other things. I care about mobility, which is tied more to all the movements and everything else. So again, it goes back to being subjective and who that boss is. So if you're a senior 0402, understand or have an understanding that your mobility folks, they are the executors of that plan. So every time we move a unit, we're actually doing our job. So all the planning and everything else, which is all 3 driven, absolutely, I work more with the 3 as I should because I'm involved in the planning. I shape dates, times. To be honest, I've always found that I'm shaping the 3, telling them what they need to do in order to facilitate what I need in order to get them lift or units lift and all that other stuff. My personal belief at the regimental level is that I should have been in the 3 and the MACTAF planner should have worked for me. Even at the MAG, I think that to be the same. But the challenge with that is careful what you ask for, because you might actually get a boss who's an aviator who knows nothing about mobility and doesn't want to hear what you have to say, versus working for a Lago 0402 major at a MAG who understands mobility, understands that you're the subject matter expert. I think that sometimes it's a double-edged sword because if you get the wrong personality in there, it's going to make it very difficult. I've been fortunate enough to never have that wrong personality I worked for. My bosses have always been phenomenal. Believe it or not, it's the truth. And they've always allowed me to do the things that I need to do. And then having that good relationship with the 3 has helped me basically get the stuff that I need for the unit overall. And when we talk about TEOs here in a little bit, remind me of the story of what my second infantry regimental commander told me in his office. And it's a tie to all of this that we're talking about. But I want to save it for the TEO topic.
Good.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What was that, Matt?
I was going to say it's Rich has hit it a couple times now. A lot of it is personality and relationships.
Yeah.
The mobility officer should be welcomed, regardless of which shop. When the 3 shop has planning meetings that deal with timelines or what capabilities the unit's moving, they need to involve the mobility officer and not think that it needs to be filtered through a 4 shop lens or anything like that, because reality, the 3 shop's going to dictate, here is what we call the RDD, required delivery date. But this is when gear needs to be on the ground at this location so we can start training, operations, whatever it is. And then the gap between when everything is staged at a port and getting to that final destination, that's the mobility officer making that happen. He's the one coming up with that plan, putting in those requests, getting that data and information. But that's going to drive from the 4 shop, as well as getting things to there, is all logistics driven. So there's just needs to be a good working relationship between the 2. And I'm envious of Rich. I have definitely been in a unit where the 3 and or the 4 did not share the same feelings on letting mobility officer come and do the things he needs to do. But if anything, I just emphasize the point more that they're a tool to be used to get a unit moved, and egos need to go away. Not saying you always have to, kowtow to the mobility officer because he's always right, and that's not always the case. But he is the one who's responsible for making that happen. And if he's not involved in it, good, bad, or indifferent, he's not going to make that happen.
Thanks for joining us. That concludes episode 6, part 2 of our mobility officer episodes. We've got one more part, so I hope that you join us next time. Please leave us some comments, subscribe, and share this podcast with other 0402s. If you've got an idea for a podcast episode, please reach out to us on Discord, Teams, or Facebook.